Good morning, good morning, good afternoon for those who are in the afternoon. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. I'm delighted to be with you this morning and to share some thoughts about evidence-based VNR. The title of my presentation is Accelerating Progress Towards the SDGs Through Evidence-Based VNR. This is because I'm truly convinced that if we use evidence to report in the SDGs, we will actually be contributing to better decision-making to accelerate progress towards the SDGs. VNRs is not just a reporting and presenting at New York. That's a means and should be a means towards an end, the end being better decision-making for better policies, better strategies, better plans, better programs. Thank you very much. Next. Next, please. I would just like to acknowledge that this presentation builds on work going on by IDEA's UNICEF, DEVAL, and the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland. We are revising the guide book on evaluation to connect national priorities with the SDGs. It also builds in various resources by DEVAL, SDGs, and others. And on the guide done by Clear Anglophone Africa and UNICEF on embedding evaluation in VNRs. These guidebooks are available in various languages, so I encourage you to look at them and look. And also in the UN resolutions on VNRs and evaluations that we will refer to them later in this presentation. Thank you. Next, please. When we talk about VNRs, what comes to our mind is not only the Sustainable Development Goals, but the entire 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, because the goals and the entire agenda are underpinned by principles, but we should never forget. So the difference between previous international agreements like the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals are that these goals are underpinned by principles that need to be considered when doing VNRs and when undertaking evaluations of the SDGs. The agenda is not just setting goals. The agenda is about transforming our world, so the transformative nature of the agenda should not be undermined. On the contrary, should be underpinning our efforts to elaborate and to present evidence-based VNRs and to take action upon them. Next. Just as a reminder, the agenda states that voluntary and country-led, that open, inclusive, participatory, and transparent, people-centered, gender-sensitive, respect human rights, and particular focus on the poorest should be included, should be guiding principles when we do evidence-based VNRs in voluntary national reviews. And the agenda also says that the follow-up and review process where we situate the VNRs and the evaluations should be rigorous and based on evidence, informed by country-led evaluation and data, high-quality data. That in order to report based on evidence and to evaluate, following up on the principles on the agenda, there is a need for enhanced capacity building support for developing countries, including a strengthening of national data systems and evaluation programs. This is what the agenda says. And to some extent, it has been forgotten because many countries have been reporting on their VNRs without linking the VNRs with evidence coming from evaluation. And this explains why the recently adopted UN resolution is putting emphasis in the linkages between these two, evidence-based VNR and country-led evaluations of the SDGs. Next, please. Important to mention just quickly relevant resolutions that have been endorsed after the Agenda 2030 resolution was launched. In 2014, a resolution on building, this was exactly before, building capacity for the evaluation of development activities at the country level. This was calling upon United Nations agencies to support countries to strengthen their capacity for evaluation. And then in 2016, 1 year after the agenda, the follow-up and review of the Agenda 2030 for sustainable development at the global level, and through which the high-level political forum on sustainable development was established to review each year the progress towards the 2030 agenda. In this high-level political forum, as you all know, the VNRs are presented and discussed, and based on a number of goals that are established by the high-level political forum itself. Next, please. So this has been going on for many years, but only in 2023, a new UN resolution, as I mentioned before, was adopted because it was seen that the voluntary national reviews of those countries, although there are some good practices, talking about the majority of them, didn't even mention evaluation or were not based on evidence coming from evaluation, or in some cases were not using any type of evidence. It was just data, hard data, and some information about progress, and all looked really beautiful. However, the information that UNDESA is showing is that most of the countries are off track with regards to the progress towards the SDGs. So there is need to take action. So this resolution is encouraging countries to present regular voluntary national reviews that with a country-led evaluation component. It means that it's linking the two, and they need to link evaluation. Then we will see the differences to voluntary national reviews, and not just to present as the practice has been up to now. So we are expecting that this July, some of the countries will actually present more evidence-based voluntary national review, stronger voluntary national review. It also encourages countries to use evidence from evaluation of the Sustainable Development Goals implementation for decision-making and for reporting towards the achievement of the 2030. As I mentioned before, VNRs are not ends in themselves. There are means that should contribute to better decision-making. And finally, it requests United Nations agencies to support these efforts and to support countries to undertake evaluations. So United Nations agencies, as well as other international organizations, are there to support countries, and you can tap on their expertise. Next, please. Yeah, as everybody knows, the voluntary national reviews are the key mechanisms of the follow-up and review process, are presented every July at the high-level political forum for sustainable development in New York. And so far, 188 countries have submitted voluntary national reviews as of 2023. But as mentioned before, only few incorporating evidence coming from evaluations or other research activities. Next, please. So before going to how to embed evaluation in voluntary national review, which is the main topic, I will quickly just like to differentiate what is evidence vis-a-vis opinion. So, and this is defined by the science. So evidence is data or information that meets the standards of internal validity and external validity. It means that it's credible. Data or information that is credible because of the way it has been constructed. Key qualities are independence, objective, and verifiable. Opinion are, however, statements and claims that do not meet the standard of evidence. They are mainly subjective, partial, selective, or hard to verify. It is useful to further explain evidence or to complement existing data. So opinion is important, but it's important when it complements evidence and not when it's used instead of evidence for decision making. Next, please. So evidence is important because it can determine what works best to achieve a specific outcomes for which group of people, over what time frame, at what costs. So when it comes to develop VNRs, we have to take this into account. What works best to achieve specific outcomes for whom, over which time, and what is the cost. Good evidence can help to depoliticize important and difficult decisions. Next. So these are different types of evidence that can be used, and if you see, it's not only hard data, it can be also beneficiary consultations, a policy and program evaluations, a stakeholder consultation, statistical data, etc. Next. Well, this is just a cartoon that explains the need to use evidence when it comes to explain situations or to take decisions. Next, please. One important aspect to take into account is that there are many discussions about the use of evidence for decision making. However, evidence is not a opinion, decision making and policy making are not only derived from the evidence. They are derived from many things that can relate to values, resources, judgment, habit and tradition, lobbyists and pressure groups, experience, expertise, and we don't deny this. These, of course, are aspects that influence decision making, but what we are proposing is that evidence should be at the core of all of these aspects together. Next, please. So VNRs, we said, are the main means for reporting, but they are mainly based on monitoring data and rarely asking, are explaining why data is explaining data, what are the reasons behind the data, and who is benefiting from this data being presented. So by providing credible evidence, evaluations are fundamental for evidence-based VNRs, and evaluations are to inform
I think you are not audible, right?
Sorry, somebody unmuted me because I didn't realize that. I don't know. I was saying next slide, please. So here we have a comparison table about VNRs and country-led evaluations, and we can easily see the complementarity between them. Whereas evaluation measure and report on national progress, mainly based on the hard data, country-led evaluations explain not only target and progress, but the extent to which progress is underpinned by the agenda principles. It means whether we are leaving no one behind, whether progress is being made with an equity lens, and evaluations support decisions by addressing the complexity of the SDGs. Whereas VNR track ongoing progress in program implementation in outputs and outcomes, evaluations build upon monitoring data presented at the VNR to further analyze how well implementations were achieved, and as well as determining long-term development impact. Whereas VNRs report on indicators against targets, country-led evaluations examine and help answer why progress or lack thereof. So VNRs are driven by accountability to achieve the SDGs target, whereas evaluations are driven by accountability towards the transformative nature of the Agenda 2030. It also incorporates a learning dimension. Again, the agenda is not just achieving goals, it's achieving goals with equity. It's achieving goals while leaving no one behind. It's achieving goals by um, shared accountability among partners. It's achieving goals while keeping the environment safe. So this entails engaging various stakeholders and being aligned with the transformative nature of the agenda, and not only achieving goals for the sake of achieving goals or without explaining to what extent no one left is being behind, no one is left behind. Equity is at the core. We are gender sensitive, etc. Next, please. How to embed evidence from evaluations in voluntary national review? I think this is the main question. The suggestion is, to the extent possible, define a theory of change. This is not indispensable, but is highly desirable. And because the theory of change will allow us to understand the causality, the multilinear causality between the actions we should take and the contribution that VNRs and evaluations can make to make a difference in the world and in our countries, of course. So after defining a theory of change, elaborating a VNR plan, engaging stakeholders, identifying existing evaluations and using their results to embed this evidence in voluntary national reviews, synthesizing results from existing evaluation, that can be an option. So we can identify existing evaluations, then synthesize the results from these existing evaluations, or undertaking new evaluations that can be rapid evaluations or evaluative workshops. We look at what they are, or a combination of all the above. So what we are saying is these are aspects that can be taken to ensure evidence from evaluations will be embedded in voluntary national reviews. Next, please. This is an example of theory of change. Indeed, it's not that difficult, but it talks about what would happen if we are clear that we were better and more sustainable development outcomes, for example. If that is our long-term result that we want to achieve, we need better and more sustainable policies and implementations, and strengthen accountability to citizens. So for what we need to do, well, we want to make sure that demand from decision makers is there, that their national plans incorporate targets of the SDGs, that there are implementation programs to address the SDGs, that governments demonstrate political will, that VNRs incorporate evidence and highlight progress, that there is greater awareness, for example. These are the main conditions below, and this will generate better knowledge, cultures of learning, social partners, that at the same time will lead to better and more sustainable policies and better and more sustainable development outcomes. This is just an example that was done for Africa, but if you see, it's general enough and can be used to develop specific theories of change in countries for Asia as well. Next, please. So for elaborating a VNR plan, it's important to to elaborate a budget and to get approval to the budget in order for a good VNR to take place, and also to mobilize political and financial support from national and government parties. This depending from the assumption that political will is important. If there is no political will, then we can probably just comply with the VNR, but we will not be doing it evidence-based, following the principles of the agenda, etc. Then developing a work plan, setting up a lead agency and coordination mechanism, setting dates for main coordination meetings with the stakeholders, deciding on which SDGs will be prioritized to inform or to report on progress, eventually contracting consultants, it will depend on the country, agreeing on the structure of the report, mobilizing data to support priority targets, and searching for existing evaluations and research relevant to the SDGs that were prioritized in order to improve and to make the VNR more evidence-based. In order to identify stakeholders, there is a tool called stakeholder mapping, and that we do not have time to describe it, but you may wish to explore the importance of using this tool. Next, please. Well, as I said, importance of engaging stakeholders like line ministries, all sectors in the government, civil society, private sector, if need be, trade unions, depending on the context, depending on which goals have been selected to report. And also important to identify a focal point to liaise with these stakeholders. And building upon the spirit of the 2030 agenda, it's also recommendable to include other, what we call non-traditional actors, like academia, BOPES, think tank, and parliamentarians. Next, please. Well, there is a global indicator framework. The link is there where you can actually explore to see what indicators are there and how to domesticate or customize the indicators to the needs of your country. Next slide, please. We will go a bit faster. So now we will go to some methodological options like rapid evaluation, synthesis, and evaluative workshops. These are not mutually exclusive that you can use to embed evaluation in voluntary national reviews. Next slide, please. We will start with rapid evaluation. Rapid evaluations are intensive in the sense that we invest limited time, but in that limited time, it's intensive work that we expect to happen. It's intensive, team-based, that is a focus assessment that uses multiple methods of data collection, and we'll see. It's not that difficult, but still we aim for a combination of methods as an iterative process of collection of data analysis, and relies on stakeholder participation in order to quickly develop a holistic understanding of a program, goal, target, policy from both an insider's and outsider's perspective. This is the definition of the University of Washington. Next slide, please. As we mentioned, rapid evaluations are intensity focused because they are done in a short period of time. Normally, it can be done between 1 and 4 months. It relies on teamwork, typically 2 or 4 team members that can be put together to undertake this rapid evaluation. And of course, skills are needed, skills in evaluation in general. There are no specific skills for rapid evaluations. There are skills on evaluation in general that are needed. We don't need a lot of budget for these evaluations to happen. Normally, budgets are reduced. And there is flexibility in the design And there is a trade-off that we need to take into account between rigor and speed. So these rapid evaluations are also used, yeah, okay, time to wrap up, are also used in humanitarian aspects to really produce outcomes in a very rapid way. Next slide, please. I need to wrap up. Well, it can be used document review, theory of change, key informant interviews, focus groups, key elements of workshops, etc. Next slide, please. Then the other method is a research synthesis, and this has been used by countries that have been very evidence-based in their VNRs, like Nigeria and Finland, for example. What they have done is they have searched for relevant studies or evaluations that already existed. And they extracted data from these relevant studies and evaluations and integrate their findings. Then an interpretation that summarized the results and of the studies, and then their research was done and was used in VNRs. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the research synthesis can be also done in a meta-analysis way that is more statistical procedures that integrates results of several independent evaluations. But this can also be combined with qualitative data. Next, please. So evaluation synthesis brings together existing evaluations or studies, assesses their relevance, and draw together the data to answer evaluation specific questions. So this is a systematic procedure for organizing findings that already exist from several disparate evaluation studies. And this was, as I said, what has been used by various countries in order to present evidence-based VNRs. Next slide, please. We are about to finish. And we will skip this. These are steps that you can look after in the PowerPoint. And this is as well, it can be statistical, or it can be more qualitative. Next, please. Then we go to evaluative workshops. Evaluative workshops are not that different from other workshops that you may know that you would have participated, because this is an internally driven evaluative exercise that is quick to run, but requires good preparation and facilitation. It can range from a 2-hour meeting to a 3-day workshop, small scale internal exercise, and can depart from existing data, can depart from conclusions from a previous evaluation, a previous study, and can also start by triggering questions that the participants would answer based upon group discussions. Next, please. There are different forms of evaluative workshops. Here we present 3 options. When there is a need to prepare when the program team develops a detailed progress report prior to the workshop, and the workshop concentrates in validating the report, or when there is content needed to be developed at the event itself, or when there is a need to complement or triangulate findings from other evaluative studies. Next, please. So the idea is to have group works that get together, discuss questions or discuss findings from previous evaluations, and they come together to discuss and go back to the groups to further discuss. And by doing that, they can come with findings and recommendations that can be valuable for decision making. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. And I think that that has been already explained, and these are some of the resources that have been used for this presentation. Thank you very much.